Okay, this is Aaron Murakami, and I have Eric Dollard on the line. And if you're on this website, you can see that we have another campaign for EPD Laboratories, and the total that we're going for is about $77,000. And can you hear me okay, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have the spreadsheet in front of me that kind of breaks down what the purpose of the money is, and a lot of people don't know, but actually in the last few months, EPD Laboratories has actually used a donation from a private donor, and over $45,000 was paid to David Whittakin, who has been the prior buyer and landlord of the building that the lab is in. And he's the one who helped kind of set up the building by purchasing it from the original owners. And this $45,000 that EPD Laboratories gave to David Whittakin was used to pay off the original owners. And right now, everything has already been through the title company and everything, and EPD Labs is now the official buyer of the building. And there's a balance of only about $29,000 left in order for EPD Labs to own the building outright. Okay, so that leaves about $48,000 left, and so the building is kind of self-explanatory. And even though a lot of the campaign will focus on the seismic project with the telephone lines and everything else, the paying off the building is actually just as important, because that'll eliminate a large monthly payment, which that money can be used for parts, working on the project, paying for Justin and John's travel out to the shop, and that kind of thing. Now, the other breakdown that we have, for example, is there's also $8,500, which is going to be allocated to 1 year of building expenses, which is basically tax, insurance, and utilities, and that's assuming that there is no more payment for the building. If there's $29,000 to pay that off, $8,500 is tax, insurance, and utilities, and then all the rest of the funding is for some other stuff. Now in here, there's $4,000 allocated for a lines truck. Do you want to kind of explain what the lines truck is?
Yeah, we're fortunate enough to, in our work for the water department, to encounter a lineman who's a caretaker at the pump house now, and he wants to join our project, and he had a line truck, and his employer died. The line truck ended up in somebody's junkyard in town here, and it appears to be, it hasn't been damaged or stripped or anything, so we need to get that line truck so that we can do a lot of this stuff without, having to deal with a lot of very dangerous climbing and rigging and all that. To be able to get poles in the ground without having to use my Corolla to lift the thing, which is a very difficult process. The car can handle it, but getting everything rigged and what have you is very difficult. So if we have a truck where we can just lift poles and drop them in the ground, or if we have the opportunity to remove old lines, then we can pull the poles out and handle all that. We can put the reels on the hydraulic equipment to turn the spools that roll up the wire, and also we can do drilling of the holes, and all of this will save a lot of back-breaking work of having to dig all the holes by hand and grind them up ourselves through some kind of Stone Age process. So at any rate, that was deemed an important purchase. The complication that we're facing that added a significant expense on top of what was already received in donations to put this line together is to put the holes in for the ground rod require special drilling apparatus into this fused volcanic ash that we have for the ground here, and the holes have to go down 40 feet, or roughly the magnitude of 40 feet, between 30 and 100, depending upon what the capacitance of the rock turns out to be. So we have to buy an apparatus to do that also, which will probably cost about as much as the line truck, because there's no other way to do it. And then some of the hardware, particularly the dead end insulators for the line, has been exceedingly difficult to find. and we're going to have to buy the stuff new, and along with the wire grips and the things that terminate the lines. That these manufacturers are having to specially make this stuff for us because it's obsolete, and it makes the price kind of expensive. So that kind of made it where we need a couple $1,000s there to finish getting all the hardware together, to put the primary line here together, and to secure the secondary line a couple 100 miles away from here, so it's free of busted cross arms and dangling wires and all that. Even though we made damn good progress this last time around, taking care of that, as will be shown from the pictures when they come out in the next week or two.
Okay. Now on this drill for the ground lines, just kind of researching some inexpensive ways to go about it, and there's about $4,000 allocated for the Hydra drill, which is made by the Deep Rock Company, and that's a company who's been making drilling apparatuses for people to dig their own wells. And even though you're not digging a water well, it's, the diameter of the bits and everything is pretty close to about what you need to drill a small diameter hole, 30 to 100 feet down into the ground to be able to put the ground rods. And so, because it could probably cost, quite a bit of money to have somebody come in and do that. But for, a few $1,000s, you can own the equipment and make as many holes as you want.
Yeah, I was that the town engineer estimated $6,000 per hole, and we need between 20 and 40 of them, and that was just absolutely prohibitive. So we have to do it ourselves somehow.
Right. So hopefully with these drill bits, we'll confirm that these bits will be able to go to that type of rock, and if so, then for about $4,000, that's the equipment, and you can make as many holes as you want.
Yeah, that's unfortunately with this geology here, that's essential. Now with the other antenna, it's not important because there's a species of vegetation that flourishes in that particular part of the desert, and its roots go down that distance. And if you just simply drive the ground rod, this is what I did at Landers, you just drive the ground rod right down the 8-foot rod, right down the center of this bush, and then the bush kind of grows around the ground rod, and you get an excellent conductive connection to the inside of the earth, and you don't have to do all this. But here, this part of the desert is the dead desert, and it's dead. And if anything grows here, it's just something clinging for life with some little filament of a root that just happened to find some little pocket of water. And the only way we can communicate with the inside of the earth electrically is we have to do it capacitively. We can't get any conduction, so that's going to require some kind of metallic surface area that goes deep into the earth, basically simulating the root of the plant.
So you'll probably line the holes with something like a PVC pipe or something, and then put a copper rod straight down the middle?
Yeah, I think it's going to be strictly capacitance. So actually the conductive process interferes with the propagation factor of the Alexanderson antenna, and once it is stored it and shorted out. So if we can do it capacitively with no conductivity, then that can just enter into all the capacitance and inductance elements in the transmission structure itself, and we can receive that better that way. And then there's less noise too, because the conductive process always has a certain amount of noise that comes with it. But the process of conduction and the metabolism of the plants and what have you contribute a certain amount of signals, enough that at one point I was thinking that some of these sounds were coming from the plants and not the ground.
Mm-hmm. There's actually been some interesting studies on that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, with this very low frequency research is really a very broad area of study. It's been completely ignored after, the telegraph days. It just, once the old telegraph lines all went away, that's the research on this went away.
Now, there's $1,000 allocated to seismic mine insurance, and most people don't realize it, but EPD Laboratories is basically has its hands on a mine with analog seismic devices in there and connected to, what are the devices embedded in the ground that picks up the mechanical vibrations?
Yeah, it's the mechanical end of it for the physical seismograph. That's that has to go along with the rest of it. What I did at Landers is I take the seismic pickup is a variable reluctance, very low frequency microphone. Works on the same principle as the phonograph pickup back in the days, when you had phonograph records. There's a moving magnetically permeable core inside a coil, and it's surrounded by a magnet. So the core is attached to the external world, which either be the rock inside the mine or the phonograph needle or whatever. And then when that moves, it causes the magnetism to shift and then generates a voltage. So normally, like at Landers, the seismic pickup device goes straight to the moving coil and the chart recorder, and that way, if there's an earthquake, that you barely feel, it'll make about a quarter-inch movement on the paper with the pen, and if there's a earthquake that you significantly feel, then it's pretty much full scale. And then if it's a destructive earthquake, then it bangs against the stops. Well, at Landers, I added a power gain of 1 billion in between the pickup and the pen, and you could see the footprint signatures of coyotes running around out in the desert, and very small little movements, little cracks and pops going on in the rocks, and subtle shifts and bulges in the earth, and all these type of things become plainly visible. The sensitivity was such that if there was an earthquake that was barely susceptible, it would destroy the chart recorder if the headroom was allowed as such. So I had to put various peak limiters in the system to prevent damage to it, so that it wouldn't be damaged by significant earthquakes. And there's a lot to be learned by studying that, putting it on an oscilloscope, and like those heartbeat oscilloscopes that have the slow trace, and watching and looking at all these waves, and putting it into a base speaker and listening to them. So at any rate, because this particular seismograph installation here that the university owned was analog, they deemed that it was worthless. And then through the appropriate federal agencies, it's been transferred into our public utilities right away out there. So we have some very sophisticated versions of these reluctance pickup. These things have magnets and cores on them so big that you can't even lift them. And it's a 3-axis type, so that rather than just the bouncing up and down, which is actually the least desirable seismic motion detector, it's also got the X and Y right angle motion. So this was an incredible donation that we have that. Otherwise, I would have to go and find all that stuff and install it, and then set it up in some mine somewhere, and then get the mine and the whole thing. Well, now thanks to the Department of Interior and the university here in the state of Nevada and all that, we have all that already constructed for us. So the only major expense is going to be getting the line from that in the town to put the seismograph display in the town building.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of like it's meant to be, because this is just sitting there, and it's literally like right next to the telephone lines.
Yeah, it's right next to our transmission right away. There is some remnants of a power connection to the thing, and then even more interesting is this is a big mine, and it's been blocked off, but if unblocked, I would estimate from the tailings it goes in 500,000 feet, and then that allows me to build an electrostatic caloric antenna inside the earth, 500 feet of rock surrounding it, in every direction, and all the way inside the earth underneath your feet. So the scientific possibilities here are very interesting. And then it's got a nice plateau on the outside that we can put our terminal building there, and that saves the incredible expense of running all these broadband lines to somewhere here in town, and then having the terminal facility here, and then having to deal with the noise and the confusion and all the stuff that happens when you're in a downtown environment, where out there it's relatively peaceful, and we can avail ourselves to our signals and stuff without the sounds of devil trucks and all the rest of it drowning it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very fortunate circumstance. It's there's a really good voodoo with this project. Everything we need just seems to be falling right in place. So it must be, as they say, part of God's plan.
Mm-hmm. Now there's about 5,000, which is marked for remaining poles, insulators, etc. You touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So just mostly for the poles to go from the end of where the telephone poles are right now to the shack, which would have like the monitoring equipment in it.
Well, right now we have those structures in an appropriate area, so it's going to be repeater cabinets bolted to poles. We have several bad poles that have to be replaced. We have been able to find, materials scattered around out in the desert from lines that have been wrecked and the remains in the past, but in all probability we're probably going to have to buy a couple more poles. But as I pointed out, it's going to be the line terminating hardware is going to be the big expense. The loading coils for the networks is going to be several $100s right there. The loading coil cases are going to have to be highly specialized because these networks, have both coils and capacitors. We got to find those. So we're going to start with 20 sections, 20 ground electrodes, 20 loading networks. That will all come up to a good chunk of money. Thinking in the terms of a few $1,000s, or you have all the numbers written down. So when we calculated this, but that's
yeah, we have.
That's what we need to do. Is we're kind of up against the wall in that, to get this far, it used up what money we had. And then I do want to point out, despite what the slimy mouth detractors are spewing on the air to defame me, not one dime of any of these campaign monies goes into any food or gas or living expenses or any of that type of stuff. I pay for all that out of my Social Security or whatever cash donations people send in the mail. So we're not living any life of Riley on this stuff. I'll tell you that right now. So it's it's one octave above destitution, and everything's metered out. So it would be nice if we could just pay ourselves wages and all that stuff, but that would double the total money amount required, and also just create a mound of paperwork that would just there's only 3 of us and possibly 4 with the new linemen we have now, and it's just beyond our capabilities to handle anything that complicated. So we're just going to do it on the way that I've always done it. We're going to do it coyote style. But the larger donation money is needed for things like the building, bulk buying of materials, and then getting, a line truck and that kind, and the insurance, because we're basically becoming a public utility company. The insurance is hideous. Mm-hmm. And that's one way in which we can keep this operation going. Also, is to become a public utilities organization, because there are places I've found where these lines are still standing and people are still subscribers to them, and the phone company is losing the capability to maintain these old technologies or find the materials. So we're going to have to engage in a cooperative arrangement with some of the operating telephone companies to get them the materials and help them maintain the lines, and then in exchange they grant us access to other materials. And so this is something that's got to be worked out also. That's going to be very difficult. And hopefully, I'm hoping by next year we'll be in a position where we can start operating like that. Right. So it's kind of like the donation money is kind of for fixed expenses, but, the rest of it, we either have to go out and earn it, like Justin and John are doing right now. They're out working and to make money so they can accumulate it and come back and work on this, and then when it builds up, I get, save enough Social Security money, because my coyote life doesn't use a lot, so no way I can possibly spend the money that Social Security gives me every month, and then that accumulates to a discharge point, and then we all have enough money where we can go out and work and then return to our various levels of destitution.
Well, on this list here, we have a 7,500 mark for the loading network, and recently John Polakowski was at the shop working on some of that with you. Do you want to take a minute or two and kind of explain what this loading network is and what you guys are doing?
Well, the loading network is the thing that I invented. It took me about 30 years to come up with, and it's the key to creating this infinite velocity propagation constant on the Alexanderson antenna. So there's no time difference between one part of the antenna or the other. That's essential so that all the ground rods operate in unison. So it requires quite a few coils and capacitors. Unfortunately, the notebooks were stolen from the Landers installation, and so those are not attainable, so I have to do a little bit of reinventing on this. So John and I were working on that a couple weeks ago here. So the loading coils I have are all the wrong size, and we don't have enough of them, so it looks like we're going to have to buy them new from some telephone supplier. So that's, and then the time, to get John here to build the networks and all that and to pay him, because I have to feed him, I have to pay his gas and stuff to get here. He seems to be able to cover his loss of employment on his own, but at any rate, that's going to be a significant project.
Right. I think I mentioned it or brought it up before in another call that we did, but this loading network, that's similar, or is it similar to some of the experiments that were shown in some of the old Borderland videos where you had
yeah,
it's
I gave a whole presentation on the two component waves that can be established by configuring coils, capacitors in a certain geometry, and then there's advancements on that and more complicated networks with more degrees of freedom. So the network that's used in this particular improvement that I've made upon the Alexanderson system is the most sophisticated of all the loading networks. In fact, it kind of opens up a whole new avenue in network theory and networks for producing musical tones, and it's an avenue of research on its own that I'm actively pursuing, and it definitely relates to my next presentation, which, by the way, right now is another major load on me. In fact, it's such a load to get this next presentation together that I pretty much can't do anything else in the meantime. So I'm pretty overloaded right now with trying to keep the line project together, process of writing the book on the last presentation and preparing the next presentation. So it's tough to keep all this together.
Right. Now there's a $3,000 marked for some U-Line industrial shelves. U-Line is a company who they're an outlet for all kinds of stuff, everything from industrial cleaning supplies to shelves and packing equipment and all that kind of stuff. And the shelves that we're looking at getting are about 10 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and 3 feet deep, and enough to line all the way down probably the longest wall in the shop. And this is for basically being able to dismantle some equipment and then organize it and shelve it.
Yeah, well, the problem here is, despite the common belief and verbal puke by detractors, there is no laboratory here. So I'm basically living in a pile of junk. I have no way to handle material. So that's the way to start with that is to get the shelves. So that does not give me a laboratory, but what it does is a rather massive amount of glom is shown up here, and I need to be able to organize the material so that I can strip this stuff and segregate all the parts and attempt to build up some kind of minimal parts inventory so that I can start to build things. And then you were pointing out, that there's a certain percentage of the funding specifically for the loading project. The complication there is I have to get certain transformers and certain test equipment and that type of stuff. So the shelving budget and the loading coil budget basically is aimed at trying to get together some kind of very basic workable facility here. where we
Right.
can start doing some of this stuff. At least take equipment apart, get the stuff off the ground, the piles of junk and all that, and open the place up. Right now, I can't find anything. It's just there's a heap of car parts over in one spot, and there's a heap of books over here, and then a bunch of boxes of tubes and miscellaneous stuff over there, and I can't really do anything. I only have the most basic of laboratory test equipment. I have no real coils or capacitors to experiment with yet, and so that's part of what this fundraising campaign is about, is to put together a way to start working here on stuff.
So with, or for anyone listening that doesn't know what GLOM is, that's basically free old, like, surplus equipment or stuff that was doomed for the dump or whatever, like maybe old radio transmitters and meters and stuff like this. And even though a lot of that stuff is free, it definitely does. It's not free to transport it to the lab. And so Steve Hills, who is actually a member of EPD Laboratories, he's the director of EPD Laboratories, so-called Glommeister. That's what he does for a living, is he travels around the country and acquires large amounts of old electrical equipment. Some of it he scraps, some of it he keeps. And a lot of that stuff has made its way to EPD Labs. And so there's still quite a bit up here in Spokane. Mark McKay, who has presented at the conference, he lives here in Spokane. He has some warehouses with a whole bunch of old electrical equipment, and a lot of the stuff he got from auctions at some of the local universities, and the stuff is just built up over the years. And a good chunk of that was already trucked down to the lab, and there's still quite a bit more here. We also still have that radar indicator with that screen that you need. And so, there's going to, out of some of the funding, we're going to have to pay for the gas money for Steve to come up and haul a lot of this stuff down to the shop, because there is still quite a bit up here in Spokane. And so besides the shop, so all the piles of the glom down at the shop right now, that's what needs to be disassembled, organized, put on the shelves and everything else to not only organize it, but that'll free up quite a bit of floor space too.
Yeah, they'll make it more organized, and then there'll be more space. There won't be piles of stuff in the way all the time, and then possibly, I can start assembling some stuff. Now, there's still plenty of other complications and expenses that, I have no real electrical system here in the building. It's just only 110 right now, even though I have three-phase power coming to the meter. I don't have any distribution. I don't have all my tools were looted at Landers. I don't have any punches. I don't have drill presses or any of that stuff. So, that could be a whole fundraising thing in itself. But then the numbers just become gigantic. So I'm just concentrating right now on what it's going to take, to get this place somewhat cleaned up and organized, be able to do some basic research here directed specifically at the Long Lines project, and not really, try to go too far with a lot of the other stuff right now. I virtually have no hopes of ever establishing an alternating current laboratory again. The expense is absolutely prohibitive. Trying to find the instruments and all that is way too difficult. It's $250,000 here, it's $250,000 there, and then I have to think at age 63, statistically, I'm going to be dead in 5 to 20 years. If it's going to take 2 years to do this and 2 years to do that, I just have to write all this stuff off and focus just on this specific project. So that's kind of how I'm handling it now.
Well, in the breakdown of the funding here, so there is $5,000 for travel expenses for Justin Miller and John Polakowski for 1 year, which is several back and forth trips throughout the year for each of them, because it definitely costs gas money and food and that kind of stuff to get these guys there working on stuff. Justin Miller is the secretary-treasurer of EPD Labs, but he's the one who does most of the work out in the field with Eric out on the telephone lines and stuff. And John does a lot of the work more on the inside of the lab. He was the one working on these loading networks that they were building recently. and then the final amount is about $10,000, which is allocated to tools, meters, parts, miscellaneous, and that kind of stuff. And so that's where the $77,000 comes from. And I do want to mention that in the last campaign, that was $26,000 that was raised. $10,000 went to securing the bond, which gave EPD Labs the access to the property, which has all those telephone lines already up, and the other $16,000 was really stretched over a long period of time. Out of $16,000 to work with, and having it stretched over, close to a year and a half, it probably accomplished, 6 figures worth of work, which I mean over 100,000, because you and Justin never took the time.
$16,000. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I mean it's it's like Josh Reynolds said, when he started funding my early work a long, long time ago and cut the funding off from everybody else, is when he cut everybody else off at the Last Supper. He looked at me and he said, "This man has done more on welfare than all of you have with my millions." And that's the same thing with Landers. I built a multi-million-dollar communications facility and research center on food stamps and menial labor, and some electrical engineering work in the city of Los Angeles. So one thing I know how to be is efficient.
Yeah, that $16,000 went a long way, and
well, I think I pointed out before the official price tag for the construction and establishment of the Landers facility by someone that was knowledgeable on that was $3.5 million. I sat down and did the cost estimate on doing the project here, which basically the aim here is to produce a complete working seismic warning system in the form that I've been talking about for this municipality here, and that's $850,000. And, we're doing it, basically on little chunks of money here and there. But, of course, the complication with that is then it takes a long time, and then, human lifespan considerations enter the equation. But that's the reality of it, is I'm doing $1 million stuff for $1,000 incomes.
Right. Now, I do want to mention that Justin Miller, since he is the treasurer of the lab, he does have the financial breakdown of exactly where the $16,000 went. And as soon as we have that, we're going to be posting that on the campaign website. And so that'll kind of put in perspective where the money went. It did go to where it was supposed to be going, and this $77,000, again, almost half of that is to pay off the building. That gets rid of the biggest expense, and then the rest is getting the lab in a good position as far as operating for a year. You're going to have shelving, can start dismantling and organizing a lot of that glom, and then this other equipment to basically finish up most of the seismic projects. So with all of this, most likely by the end of the year, that's when we're moving into the next phases of the project, where you would be able to show some of the ground signals from this network.
Yeah, there'll be signals being received, however much interference or whatever is yet to be determined. But, most importantly, there'll be an archetypal system. There'll be something that can be shown that this is what needs to be built, and this is what it's going to produce, and this is what it's going to look like, this is how big it's going to be, this is what kind of parts it's made out of, and so on.
Right. Now, so, if you're listening to this, anything that you can donate is helpful, no matter how big or how, even if you can only donate a few dollars here and there. But definitely, please share this campaign and help make this a reality. Getting this building paid off. Would that basically be the first time you or an organization you're with actually owns the property that you're working in? Yeah.
This is kind of a unique situation. So usually it's been like a private property owner or a corporation or governmental type things, which were not friendly to what we were doing. So fortunately, the government thing here is friendly. And the private ownership of the building helps out a lot because then I don't have to worry about somebody dying on me or getting a bad attitude or whatever and then losing the whole place.
Right. Well, we definitely need to get EPD labs in a position where, something like that can't happen, because once it's paid off, it's, not that hard to generate the money for tax, insurance, and utilities, once that payment is done. And for, everybody's info, the book and video sales available through ericpdollar.com. That's Eric's official homepage. If you go to the book and video section, any of those books and videos that people are purchasing for at least maybe the last, almost 2 years or something, that money has pretty much paid the building expenses, the rent, utilities, tax, and insurance. Those sales are not what they used to be, because most people who are subscribed to your announcement newsletter and otherwise, most people have already purchased these packages. So we are having some more things published, such as the Verser Algebra book, the next one coming out. There'll be the conference presentation coming out. And so that money that comes in from those sales is pretty much dedicated to handling building expenses. And so, again, anything that you can donate will help. The $77,000, we're going to be running this campaign for 60 days. And we want to definitely meet and, exceed that goal if possible. And so is there anything you want to add to this, Eric?
Well, we're still also, trying to keep the cosmic induction generator project going too. So that's kind of, adopted or whatever along with the thing. I'm hoping by about the same time that we have a finished transmission structure here to demonstrate that will have the transformers will have full power applied to them, enough to start producing some of these discharges and other things that I know people are quite interested in. And also, there are some people interested in that from the music standpoint, and one of my primary areas of research right now is music and waveforms and the ether and all that type of stuff. So there'll be a number of auxiliary projects that will be kept alive throughout the process. So there'll be more happening out of this money than actually, what we're portraying it as. There'll be a couple other things that'll probably get done too, because so much has gone into them so far. A lot of this stuff now is starting to reach some level of completion. The cosmic induction thing gets hung up because it's extremely difficult to build these high-power radio transmitters and all that, and then that's primarily, John's project right now, but he's got to work and pay his rent, and deal with the catastrophes of life in Babylon, which are all absorbing. So it's going kind of slow. I really would like to get it to a point here pretty soon where he can just be paid full time. It's really important that he just be paid full time and he move out here and we get him a house and all that stuff, and so he can just keep going on this because he's quite productive.
Right.
And he has the knowledge and all that, and he's dedicated to this, and he doesn't have any major Babylonian commitments. And then I think if it got to that point, and to get it to the point also where Justin was on a full payroll, and I'm pretty much self-sufficient on my Social Security, I don't need any money, we could really move forward then.
Right. Well, that'd be the ultimate goal, to have it funded where he could be a full-time employee. And even with John Polakowski, at some point, if the funding is there to hire him as an employee, then he could just, go to town on all these other projects inside the lab.
Yeah, I mean that's what he wants to do. So he would be working on it full time, and then then stuff could really get done. Then myself, I mean, I'm completely independent. So the first emphasis is to get John on a payroll. Of course, in this society, you pay somebody, a certain quantity of money, but you have to multiply that by 2 because of all this health insurance and taxes and all that type of stuff, and then you got to multiply by another factor because of rent and all these other things. So if basically you got to figure if someone's got $1,000 a month income, it's a $4,000 a month load on the overall finances. So that would be a big chunk. But if somehow we could get to that point where we could have a 5-year interval where we just, went full bore on this, well, I might see something in my lifetime get done, of major significance. So incrementally, we're trying to get there. We really need to get a big grant.
Well, you guys have definitely made huge progress on what you had to work with, financially and otherwise, and already what's coming together and what should be available by the end of the year, I think is already hugely significant. I mean, that's a huge step, and for EPD Labs to basically be the owner of it, and especially getting this building paid off, is a huge step, in the right direction. And I want to mention.
Well, see, also there's the written output too. Since I got my Social Security and since people have been supportive of my work, I've been able to pretty much dedicate myself full time to this writing, and my productivity in that area has gone up thousands of percent. And the material that I'm putting out is becoming more and more refined. And that might be actually one of the more important aspects of EPD Laboratories, because a lot of young engineers are picking up on this, and it's really turning out to be quite a boost for them, judging from what I'm getting from the letters I get in the post office. Is people are getting themselves good positions in electrical engineering type outfits because of the knowledge they gain from my writings.
Right.
And it's quite possible this Further Algebra project and the books that are currently coming out on that could be, in a certain way, a mathematical revolution. I'm starting to get feedback that there's some absolutely fantastic possibilities there that can open up new avenues in mathematics, so that's always very encouraging.
Right.
So
well, your work is definitely...
what's going on is actually going on a wide level. It can't really be pinpointed to, we're building this little device or we're putting up these telephone poles or all that. This is basically, the aim of EPD Laboratories is to create some minuscule seed or progenesis of Bell Telephone, which was truly the eighth wonder of the world. The knowledge pool that was held by Bell Telephone Laboratories was massive, and it's all that now is rapidly getting lost, and we're trying to at least create a seed of it. So, at worst or best, or however you want to say, at least there'll be the interest in people's minds to go dig all that material back out of the dumpster and try to create some fraction of that incredible pool of genius that Bell Telephone once held.
Well, your work has definitely, inspired thousands of people around the world, and more young electrical engineering students are getting more and more interested in your work. I get the messages all the time through Facebook and YouTube and private messages through the forum and stuff. And I don't know if I gave you too many details on it, but the Eric Dollard fan club, who sends some regular donations to you, helped to pay for a handful of young electrical engineering students to come to the conference for free. There's enough money to cover food and lodging. They just have to get themselves there. And so in the middle of July at the conference, there's going to be four young electrical engineering students, and a couple of them have been following your work for a while. And you haven't read their essays, but your work has been very inspirational to them. So hopefully, we're going to do what we can to get a lot more of the younger generation involved in the real electrical sciences.
Well, I mean, this is kind of going to have to happen, because I'm getting old and I don't want this just to all die with me. So someone's going to have to pick up where I left off. And I am kind of, retired in this now. I don't have the energy that I used to have. I don't want to, go out and have to dig telephone pole holes all day or climb poles or whatever. I'm kind of slowed down. The writing thing is my main outlet right now, and my primary research interests are in music, which is kind of, external from a lot of the things we're talking about, but not totally, as will be, evidenced by my next presentation. So it's I really need to create some kind of human EMF to help all this come into being.
Right. Sounds like we need to develop some type of course based on your writings being the textbooks for it, to walk somebody from one point to the other in order to get the best grasp on your work as possible.
Well, that's kind of how this has all been happening, because this Lone Pine Writings, in that situation where my car was sabotaged and my dog was taken away from me and my installation was looted, and there I was, standing in the dirt, the base of the Sierras, what to do. That's the point at which I decided to rewrite the book on electricity, totally out of my head with no references. So the Lone Pine Writings are kind of a course on electricity, and the presentations and the other things that followed are a course on electricity, and the stuff I'm writing now, basically from that first day where me and a couple of other people conceived this whole thing, sitting in the museum there in Lone Pine, has been an ongoing process, and I'm actually probably learning more out of it than the people that are reading it, because as I work with these, original archetypal concepts and keep redeveloping, and redefining electricity in those terms, all kinds of new knowledge is coming out of it for me and then for other people too. So I don't know where it'll go, because it's its own path. As I further compound the symbols and the relationships and the things that I first put out in the Lone Pine Writings, and they get more involved and more complex and more deeper, the understanding of electricity that's going to come out of it is almost anyone's guess as to how far it can go. But it's enough to it keeps me quite interested in it. Each chapter is very difficult to start. It's kind of like one of those processes where you feel like you're going to throw up and you don't know if you should, or make yourself feel better or not, or whatever, and it's confusing and it's a struggle and it just seems impossible. And then all of a sudden I get to the point where the archetype is formed, and then I get a complete set of notes, and this is what I'm going through now with one chapter in my book, and for this presentation, is then all of a sudden the other day it got to the point where it all fits together, and then it's like a whole revelation. It's an exhilarating experience. So that's what helps keep me going on it. But then I got to start the next chapter.
So I want to mention about the perks in the last campaign. For those who donated in the last campaign, which I think that was around January 2014 or so when we did that and raised $26,000. So for people who donated over a certain amount, they're going to get an autograph photo from Eric, and most everybody received those. Now, if you donated and you were entitled to one of those autograph photos but did not receive it, the reason is because your address was either incomplete, or when you filled out the information to get an Indiegogo campaign or whatever the process is, some of you didn't put an address in, or it was incomplete. So I wasn't able to mail those out, but I still have a stack of those photos and envelopes with your name on it ready to go. So if you donated and were eligible for one of those autograph photos, just contact us and we'll send that out, but we need the actual address. And for some of you who donated at the higher amounts, besides getting like an autograph photo, I'll have to look at what the other perks were. But some of you still have a trip to the facility coming at some point in the future when that's ready. And by the end of this year, let's say this campaign, we meet or exceed the goals, have the building paid off, and have this other stuff where we can take the seismic project where we're receiving the signals by the end of the year. Then after that, we'll arrange something to where a handful of you who qualified, depending on how much you donated, to arrange some trip out to the lab. You cover your own expenses to get out there, and then stay a few days and actually meet with Eric and take a tour of the facility. And so I guess with that, we can probably wrap it up. That's a pretty good overview of what money is needed, where it's going to be going. And do you have anything else to add?
I think that pretty much covers everything.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Eric. We're all hoping for a successful campaign. I appreciate your time, and thanks for being on this call with us.
Okay, well, thank you.